You're listening to The Back 40, the podcast for Ontario farmers, covering topics and issues that matter most to Ontario agriculture. Brought to you by Trillium Mutual Insurance, bringing the ag community together one podcast at a time. I'm the host of The Back 40, Mike Bryan, agribusiness specialist at Trillium Mutual Insurance. The idea of reusing extra byproducts from food processing is something that the feed industry has long been aware of. I spent a lot of years in the hog industry, and certainly there's a lot of hog farmers out there that make a living making their feed out of byproducts that they can get their hands on that make for a cheaper feed source. The idea of using these different food products, though, for human food is something that most of us don't think of. We think of that initial product that we get from the crop, and that's all that it's of any use for, and we don't give much thought to where the rest of it goes. There's a movement out there that's trying to change that. Today, we're talking with Cher Mereweather from Provision Coalition. She is the president and CEO. Cher, welcome to the Back 40.
Thanks, Mike. Nice to be here.
So tell us, what is Provision Coalition?
So Provision Coalition is a boutique consultancy, and we work right across the food system from primary agriculture through to retail, helping companies embed purpose, sustainability, and circularity into their business.
So the idea of a circular food economy is something that we have spoken about on the podcast before. You have a project going now called Repurpose. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think it's important to sort of set the context. So for the last 10 years, Provision has been focused on our purpose is making food sustainably, and our vision is one of a circular food system. And so for the last 10 years, we have really focused our efforts on how do we prevent waste first and foremost in those food companies. Probably the most exciting pieces of work that we've been involved with is the Our Food Future initiative, which is really about creating this tech-enabled circular food system at a municipal level. And so just as a reminder for all those who are listening, when we talk about a circular food system, this is one that is inspired by the planet's natural cycles. It reimagines and regenerates the systems that feed us. It eliminates waste, it shares in economic prosperity, and it nourishes our communities and our people. What we're trying to achieve, the results that we're trying to create, is a 50% increase in the access to nutritious, affordable food, 50 new circular businesses, collaborations, and social enterprises, and a 50% increase in the economic benefit from unlocking the value of waste. And that last key result is sort of at the heart of our repurpose work. So within that Our Food Future initiative, we were one of the key delivery partners to work with 8 local companies in the city of Guelph County of Wellington and help them transform their business to one that is circular. And one of the companies is Wellington Brewery. We started our work with them like we would any other company, first understanding where are we wasting product. So where's beer going down the drain, if you will. So first and foremost, we wanted to prevent the beer from being wasted. And then we started to look at, a natural byproduct of beer is spent grain. And they were sending their spent grain to livestock. So not unusual for the food system to leverage that livestock feed side of it, as you talked about. But we wanted to look at, are there better ways or higher value ways for us to leverage all of the spent grain and keep it in the human supply chain for a little longer? And so this idea, we stood in that possibility of what if we could do something else? So we started to explore, what can you do with spent grain? Well, you can create bread products. You could feed it to insects to see if you can create a higher value livestock feed. We thought, what if we did both? So we took some of the spent grain and we sent it to Orca Solutions, and the black soldier flies converted it into a supplement for fish feed. And we sent some of the spent grain to Grain Revolution. And at the time, we were also working with Escarpment Labs, which creates the yeast for the craft brewing industry. And we took some of their spent yeast and we worked with Grain Revolution to create an upcycled sourdough bread. And then we started to get a little bit more creative. And he said, what if we could actually create an entire meal and serve it in a restaurant as a way to demonstrate that you can upcycle these ingredients and make them delicious. So we reached out to Court at the Neighborhood Group, and who's the president and CEO. And so they are the largest B Corp certified restaurant chain and they are local to the city of Guelph. Got 5 restaurants here, and said, what would you think about an idea of upcycling a meal and showcasing it? And of course, Court being who he is, he's like, let's try this. So we started to pull the partners together and say, okay, well, what if we have something that has bread, and Orca Solutions can do connected to rainbow trout? Let's have a conversation with Izumi Aquaculture. So we got Izumi Aquaculture involved and fed the fish supplement to their rainbow trout. And then we took the fish detritus, or the poop, and applied it to a local potato farmer. So we engaged Smoy Farms. And then we brought all 3 of those ingredients, so the potatoes, the sourdough bread, and the rainbow trout, and we gave it to 3 of the restaurants at the Neighborhood Group and asked the chefs to create meals. All that to say, it was a wonderful success, and we showcased it for the month of October in 2020. The world got really excited about this concept of making a gourmet meal out of what was once deemed waste. And of course, we had a nice glass of Wellington Brewery's beer at the side of our fish and chips and so on. So then we thought, well, what else can we do? And what was interesting about this whole process was other companies started to reach out and say, well, we have unavoidable byproduct. Could we try and do something? And one of those companies was Sunrise Soya, and they are the largest tofu production company in Canada. They said, when we make tofu, there's a natural byproduct called okara and soybean whey, and we'd really like to be able to do more than just feed it to livestock. We think that it's packed full of nutrients, and can we begin to explore what we do with this? And it was through those conversations that we and many other companies started to reach out to us, that we got this perspective of there's a lot of food companies that have unavoidable byproducts, whether it is peels, whether it is pulp, whether it is spent grain, whether it is just a natural process. We thought, we need to support the industry. This is for us, this is the next frontier of food loss and waste prevention. So we started to explore this idea of creating a repurpose incubator where we can actually support a company with taking that unavoidable byproduct, understanding what the nutrient profile is, getting clear on what the market opportunities are, what do the logistics look like, what does commercialization look like, and how can we bring those ingredients or products to market. And so we were really fortunate to leverage some investment from the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, and the City of Guelph through their COIL program. And we now have investment for 6 Ontario companies to go through the repurpose incubator. And so the evolution of that is that Sunrise Soya is the very first company to go through the repurpose incubator. And the Upcycled Food Festival is the showcase of this first company that has gone through the incubator, and it is a celebration of upcycled products. So after the last year, what we've been up to is, again, working with Sunrise Soya. We got clear on what the nutrient profile looks like for okara. We started pulling together other partners, so Abakichi and Vision Bakeries, and we started to explore, well, what can you do with okara? Now, Abakichi is an interesting company because their whole premise is around upcycled foods. So they already produce a miso from upcycled sake grains, which is a Japanese wine. And then Vision Bakeries is very similar. They are all about what can they do with their products. So we took the okara and did a fresh ramen noodle with Abakichi. And with Vision Bakeries, we dried the okara and created a muffin mix. Then we thought, well, with the ramen noodles, could we actually do a meal kit? So we engaged with Nature Knows, and they do fresh fruit and vegetables in 100% compostable packaging. And so what we took from them was the seconds, or the vegetables that don't meet those retail specifications, but still are delicious. And meet all of the quality specs. And we took their seconds and put them into the meal kit. And then we went back to Sunrise Soya and said, well, what about all of the broken tofu that doesn't, again, meet the retail specifications? Can we take that tofu and put it into the meal kit? And so that was sort of how we pulled all of the different pieces together. And on October 22nd, we officially launched the Upcycled Food Festival, and the ramen noodle kit is now available for purchase both online, as well as we have a number of restaurant partners who are doing their own take on the ramen noodle meal kit throughout the month of November. So long-winded answer, but that is the evolution of the Repurpose Incubator and the Upcycled Food Festival.
When I was researching this, I went online to have a look at what exactly it was that you were putting out there. And I saw last year's menu, which was the trout and the potatoes and 3 different meals that were available for that. And my biggest disappointment was to find out that it wasn't available anymore, that was a one-time deal and we'd just done that. How's the public received all of this idea that this meal is made of upcycled food?
The public has been really receptive. And just to sort of step back and give you a little bit of context, so Court is quite excited by the impact that those upcycled meals had. And really the reason it's not on the menu is largely because of COVID. But my understanding is that he has every intention to bring back the fish and chips in particular. That was the most popular at the Woolly Pub. And so I'm still optimistic that that will return.
That's good, because that's actually the one that I was really looking at. And I love fish and chips. I thought that'd be a great meal to try. Research,
Absolutely. For sure. And so going back to your original question of, how are the consumers responding? There are statistics that say that 60% of Canadians actually want to learn more about upcycled food. I would say that COVID has certainly opened up a whole new world of, how do we think about local and sustainable, and how do we prevent waste in our own home, and how do our purchasing decisions make an impact? And this is what the Upcycled Food Festival is all about. This is about bringing that awareness to the consumer that it can be delicious, local, healthy, sustainable, really bringing that perspective to the consumer.
I don't think there's any consumers out there that have a problem with the idea of reusing other parts there. But I do think that there's a lack of information there, of that understanding that, sometimes the byproduct or the secondary products that we get from these processes is quite nutritious and does get used in further food processes there. We haven't done a really good job of that, maybe partly education, but it's also partly the use of those. It's been maybe just as easy to say, hey, well, we'll just put that into livestock feed.
Absolutely. And I think that it's a mindset shift for everyone, right? Industry has not acknowledged all of the nutrient profile, or most of industry hasn't. The focus has been make my product, get it out the door, as opposed to saying, what else can I do? The scaling is the biggest challenge. Certainly that's what we're experiencing even within the early days of our incubator. It's great to say, here we've got a proof of concept, but how do we actually scale it? How do we support the logistics and the commercialization of it? There's lots of barriers still. And I think for many food companies, I'm going to focus on the product that I know is going to be received, and I don't have time or energy to focus on these unavoidable byproducts. So that's the intent behind the incubator, is to make it easy and to show them that there's a revenue opportunity here, and there's a massive environmental and social impact side of this too.
The truth is that from the economic standpoint there, you have to be able to show that this is going to make you money, not cost you money. I mean, we all talk about the social responsibility, the environmental responsibility and all that, but many times it comes down to dollars and cents. And if it costs me more to get rid of that, then I'm not going to do it. That can be somebody else's product. And frankly, I don't care very much what they do with it, as long as I don't have to deal with it.
And that's perfectly okay too, because you're right, the dollars and cents are an important component of this, but it's about recognizing that it's available and having that ability to tell people. And so part of the COIL work that we're doing with the City of Guelph is we've created a resource exchange. And so if you don't have the time or energy or want to invest in what else can I do with my byproduct, you can post it on this resource exchange. And you can say, hey, I've got this available. Does somebody else want to tackle it? And so that opens up this whole new possibility of, what is one person's waste is someone else's resource.
It's a new concept from the standpoint of in the food system. And to put it in context, you take soybeans and we crush them and extract the oil, and then we're left with soybean meal. Now, at times it's difficult to tell, is the oil the primary product or is the soybean meal the primary product? And at different times it drives the profitability for the crushers. This is the same concept here. It's like, okay, we don't just want the oil and we don't care what happens to the rest of it. This is, okay, how do we make use of this entire product? And there's a revenue stream from both of it. That's in the feed industry, in the livestock industry. What you're talking about here, though, is how do we do the same thing? And instead of putting it into the livestock feed, we put it into the human feed first, human food first.
It's about looking at every single component and saying, how do we keep it in the human supply chain for as long as possible? And as we continue to explore that opportunity and have that circular mindset, then that's where the new innovations will come.
And the innovations are just starting. But probably your biggest challenge there is going to be the scalability then, am I correct?
Yeah, certainly that's what we see as the biggest barrier, whether it is investment in capital, whether it is the logistics to move it to where it needs to be, maintaining the viability of the byproduct. There are some very real infrastructure issues that will continue to need to be evolved in order to really see this come to life.
Do you like what you're hearing from the Back 40? We'd like to hear from you. Send us an email with your comments and thoughts to theback40@trilliummutual.com or follow us on social media @trilliummutual. So you've had two projects. You've had the first one with, I'll call it the fish and chip experiment, although there were other meals as well. You've had that experiment. Now you're working with the miso pasta. What else is on the horizon there? Those have been successful, maybe not scaled yet, but been successful. What's on the horizon there? How do you anticipate proceeding as we go along here?
So what's on the horizon is it's all about the incubator. And so as I said, we've got this wonderful investment to work with 6 companies. And so we're just at the early stages of intake. Companies that are interested, that are in Ontario, can apply. And so if you have an unavoidable byproduct, do check us out at Repurpose by Provision on our website, and you can apply to see. The cost share is it's quite significant. It's about an 85% cost share because we really want to see this innovation come to life. What's next for us is taking those 6 companies through the incubator, getting that proof of concept, getting clear on what's required to scale. And that what we want to do after that is take the incubator right across the country. So that's our end goal, is to be able to offer these services right across the food system, right across the country.
So take us through the different steps. So if you had a company, and you will have different companies that will come in with ideas for next year, what are the steps that they would go through this incubator process in order to start with an idea and end with a meal at the other end?
What we would do first is sort of engage with the company and get clear, is there any food waste that's happening in the operation first and foremost? We want to prevent the food waste. Then we'll look at, okay, what are the unavoidable byproducts? So the natural byproducts that happen in the processing or I'm going to speak as though it's a food processor or manufacturer, but it could be a farm, it could be a restaurant. Then we look at, okay, what is the nutrient profile of the byproduct and get clear on what we're working with. Then we have R&D partners with the University of Guelph, as well as Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, who will look at, well, what else can we do with these byproducts? Then we will look at, okay, what's the potential market pull for those products? What's it going to take to commercialize it? What's the infrastructure that we're going to require? What are the logistics? Are there co-packing opportunities? So we basically do the full feasibility study. We'll look at the economics of it. And then sort of the final piece of that is, here is your feasibility study of what it's going to take this to market, so that the company has all of that information. They understand what's the potential market size, what it's going to take to commercialize it. And then we're hoping that future investment in the incubator would be that we could actually support these companies with investing in it.
So you've got 6 companies out there. I'm assuming that you've got these spaces filled for next year, or are you still looking for people that have ideas?
So actually, with the launch of the Upcycled Food Festival was also the launch of the Repurpose Incubator. And so we are just in the early stages of taking the company intake. So we've got about 10 applicants already and are in the review process. So I expect that those 6 spots will be grabbed up pretty quickly. But yeah, we're still taking applications as we speak.
In 3 years, you've come a long way from taking an idea of one project and then creating an incubator that you've proved that will work. And now you're taking it to, again, scaling your own idea here. Where do you see this down the road for your own company and for the industry at large?
As I said, this is really an opportunity to support the entire food system right across our country. And so that is the end vision, if you will, is one more piece to support the circularity of the business. So at Provision, we work with companies to get them clear on why do they exist beyond profit and embed that deeply into their business, and then help them embed sustainability and circularity into the heart of their organization. So we will do work on how do you prevent waste? How do you have a regenerative culture? How do you execute a strong circular strategy? And this is just one more piece of that larger puzzle. So it's really important to us that we're not ever working in isolation, that we're only doing one component of it, because the food system is very holistic and so are businesses. And so it's really key for us that we're looking at the business holistically. So how do we engage and create a regenerative culture? How do we make sure that the strategy is driven by purpose? How do we make sure that when they're looking at waste to drive revenue and to reduce costs, that they're doing it in a very circular format? So it's all, pull it all together. That's what the future is.
So these companies that are applying, are they generally already, do they generally have a culture there where they're looking to be socially conscious of this? Or are these companies that are just simply saying, how can I become more efficient? Or is it a combination?
I'd say that the food system in general is still in that place of how do I become more efficient and how do I drive costs out of my system? And the companies that engage with us evolve into this new, different mindset that focuses on the circular regenerative culture. But yeah, I would say by and large, the food system, we call it transactional. So they're very transactional, where it is about one transaction, whether that is with their employees, whether that is with a segment of their supply chain. We're trying to broaden that horizon into how do I look at this as a holistic system? How do I make sure that I'm aware of my risks and vulnerabilities from the fact that I am in the food system? What's happening in my supply chain? How do I make sure that I'm not vulnerable because I haven't considered things like environmental risk or climate or whatever the case is? So it's really key here that we're thinking about everything in a bigger picture and a bigger lens.
That will be a shift for many companies because we, as you say, we are very transactional in what we do. I buy this and I sell this, and then I have this that I get rid of. Whether I'm able to sell it or whether it goes to landfill, we're not typically in the food system. We don't typically think that way.
It's take, make, dispose, right?
Yep.
Versus shifting to that idea that everything is a resource and where does it go when I'm finished with it, and can someone else use it? And so that is a fundamental shift in the mindset. And that's what we're trying to achieve.
Now, from my standpoint and from a farm standpoint, we've often seen these food byproducts. They end up in the feed system for the animals there. And there's nothing wrong with them. They make very good feed. Brewer's grains in particular is a really good example. It's widely used in the industry there. We're certainly familiar with that idea of putting it into the food system first as opposed to livestock feed is a little bit of a different concept. Fair to say your concept is that first, we use the product, then we try and use the byproduct in the food system. And if we can't do anything else with it, then it ends up in the feed system, is where you're going with this?
Yeah, absolutely. Sort of that, following that traditional hierarchy that says, prevention and reduction and then diversion, so that we're looking at, well, how long can we keep it up at the top of the hierarchy? Let's keep it in the human supply chain for as long as possible. Let's make sure we're not wasting, first and foremost. And then anything that is a natural byproduct, can we keep it in that human supply chain before it then gets degraded into some diverted form?
depending on whose statistics you listen to, up to 50% of the food that we harvest may never be eaten by anyone or may be wasted. That's something that from feeding the planet and from making sure that we have a stable food supply, anything we can do to reduce that is certainly a major advantage here. And this is a great project for getting there. Question for you. You've talked about this from the standpoint of the Provision Coalition and Repurpose and the Upcycled Food Festival. Why do you do this? Because obviously this is more than just, oh, well, I've got a job. This has got to be a passion for you. So what is it that drives you?
It's almost ingrained in my soul, I guess. From the time that I was 4 years old, I've always been passionate about food and gardening in particular, not necessarily agriculture, but I have these wonderful memories of planting the vegetable garden with my dad. And, I could be anywhere playing and he would literally holler and say, it's time to plant the garden. And I would come running. My family has always been deeply connected to nature. We interior camping and canoe trips. And so you have this deep appreciation of nature and food growing up. And when I went to university, it was really clear to me that we were on a path of environmental degradation. And that was a real driver for me, was how can we continue to play in nature if we're not taking care of nature? So that's where my passion started, was got to save the world from the degradation that I'm seeing happening in the natural system. And it was really at the University of Guelph that I got connected in a much larger way to the food system, being an agricultural university. And the rest, I say, I guess, is history. I spent the better part of my career only in the food system and driven by that passion to save the world.
It's an interesting concept because I grew up on a farm and we had our own vegetable garden. What you see in the stores is you see the perfect produce, right? The carrots that are nice long carrots, no blemishes on them, the apples that have no spots and certainly no wormholes. And I grew up getting imperfect produce from our garden. And if there's a bad spot, you cut it off. And if you had an apple that had a worm, you ate around it or you cut it out of it. Those are concepts that for large portions of a society, that concept has been lost. This idea that, just because there's a little spot that isn't any good, the rest of the produce is still good. And we throw away too much of that because it's just got a small spot or a small scab or a blemish on the fruit.
Absolutely. And I think we have made some progress. There's still more work that needs to be done around, what is acceptable retail specifications. And I think that there is a real acknowledgement and recognition across the food system that food waste is a priority. And so we're starting to see some of those shifts. It takes time, but certainly starting to move in the right direction.
So we've talked a little bit about, the social aspects and the environmental aspects here. Is there a market for this? Are people interested in getting involved in producing the food and ultimately buying the food and eating it?
And really, that's the crux of it. We want to be able to demonstrate to industry that there is market demand for upcycled products. And so that is part of what we want to achieve with the Repurpose Incubator, is get clear that there is a consumer demand, that there is that market pull for these products, and that we can demonstrate that there is a market for the ingredients that we create or the new products that we create. So at the end of the day, if this is successful, we can then demonstrate to those companies that there is a business case for investing in upcycling. Interestingly, at the start of 2021, Whole Foods said that upcycling will be one of the number one trends. And we couldn't agree more. So we think that we can prove this.
Along the lines of market demand there, people may wonder, okay, so how do I contribute to this? What difference can I make to this from a personal standpoint?
As we've been talking about, this is all about the movement, right? Paying attention to what you're buying, thinking about your food differently. So we've tried to create some great ways to get involved. In the Upcycle Food Festival, we have Instagram giveaway. So for every meal kit that you purchase, you have an opportunity to win a $500 gift card from Marvin Restaurant, who is one of our core restaurant partners. You can go and try out all of their wonderful food. This is, again, all about bringing awareness to thinking differently about your food and getting involved.
So the ultimate end to this, the Upcycled Food Festival, where we actually get something to eat that has gone through this process here. Tell me about the food festival.
Yeah, so the food festival, you can check out upcyclefoodfest.ca, and you can order your own kit online. If you are in Southern Ontario, we'll deliver it right to your door. You can also check out the restaurants that are involved and go and try some of the beautiful product that they've taken the kit and they've upped it up a notch, if you will. But in terms of what we have in store for the festival, which is going to run through to the end of November, we are doing a live event, once again, in partnership with the neighborhood group. So at the Woolly Pub in Guelph, we will have a live event where we cook up the ramen noodle meal kit, and we'll have tastings for everyone. And that is on November 19th. And then we are doing an industry panel on November 23rd. And the industry panel will bring together all of the partners that came together to create the ramen noodle meal kit. And we'll talk about what were some of the challenges, what were some of the barriers, what were some of the successes that allowed us to get to where we are, and what are some of the struggles with how do we scale this and how do we really take it to the next level so it's not a one and done. And the last piece of the festival will be at Sobeys, where we do the official launch of the Vision Bakery upcycled the muffin mix with Cara flour. And one more piece, on October the 27th, we will be doing a live kitchen with Compass Group. It's going to be a teaching kitchen for their students at 6 of their universities right across the country. And then we're also doing a media event earlier in the day. So there'll be an opportunity for media to learn more about the actual ramen noodle kits.
It sounds like it's going to be a great event. And I personally am looking forward to sampling some of the food that's going to be produced. My biggest problem is I'm an hour and a half away from Guelph, and I may have to make a couple of trips there just to go down and sample it. It's a great opportunity. If people want to find out where they can get a kit or where they can find the food, how do they find that information?
Check out upcyclefoodfest.ca. You can purchase your meal kits. It'll show you where we are delivering to, and as well as the restaurants that are participating. And what's important here, of course, we want you to try out the meal kit, but what's important here is to join the movement. This is bigger than all of us. This is about thinking differently and seeing food differently. And that's the call to action here.
From an industry standpoint, there's an opportunity here. You already have 10 applications for your incubator for this coming year, but not too late to get involved in that either. So if somebody has an idea or thinks they might want to get involved or find more information about how they get involved from an industry standpoint, where do they go for that information?
So if you are interested in applying for the Repurpose Incubator, it's repurposebyprovision.ca. You can go and check out the website there and complete the application. It's a really simple application process. There's only a few questions of getting clarity on what your byproduct is and what you want to do with it. And then we'll do an interview to get a little bit more information, and the approval process is pretty quick.
It's a very worthwhile cause. It's something that from an environmental and social standpoint that we all need to be more aware of. And we're looking forward to seeing how this plays out over the next few years. And hopefully we get a better understanding and appreciation of how do we prevent food waste and how do we keep that food, as you say, at the upper level as long as possible.
Absolutely.
We've been speaking with Cher Mereweather from Provision Coalition about repurpose and the Upcycled Food Festival. Cher, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Mike. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to The Back 40. Brought to you by Trillium Mutual Insurance. Join us next time when our guest will be Cole Powers from Intelliculture, and we'll be talking about all that data that gets collected on farm and what do you do with it. That's next time on The Back 40. Be sure to subscribe to The Back 40 wherever you find your favorite podcasts so that you don't miss an episode. The Back 40, bringing the ag community together one podcast at a time. I'm Mike Brine. Until next time, take care and stay safe.